Hey everybody, I'm out here answering your questions again. Let's dive right into your next question. Libby asks, what does the Federal Reserve do and what is it? So the Federal Reserve is like what we would call today the national bank. If you remember in your study of U.S. history, we had the first national bank and the second national bank, and it's Andrew Jackson in that era and all that kind of stuff. The Federal Reserve is sort of like that, except the Federal Reserve deals with what we call monetary policy. The Federal Reserve sets the interest rate for when it loans money to banks. That in turn influences the interest rate that banks charge to other people when those individuals or businesses are borrowing money. And so the monetary policy has to do with the interest rate that's set. If it's a lower interest rate, people are more likely to take out more loans because essentially the money costs less. If the interest rate goes up, then people are willing to take out less money. And so this has an effect, of course, then on the inflation rate. So if more money is available, then the inflation rate usually goes up. And if less money is available, then that inflation rate usually goes down. And that's usually how it works, although it's been such a low interest rate right now that the Federal Reserve has been doing that they don't have much of a place to go with it. We'd expect that it would influence the inflation rate, but it really hasn't. So there are these other things that the Federal Reserve does called quantitative easing and making money available in different ways, but that's way beyond what we want to talk about here. Definitely want to ask your econ teachers about it, though. Good question. Federal Reserve, like the national bank. And so when we're looking at all of the economic problems that are happening right now, of course, there's the fiscal policy about taxing and spending and getting money to people. But there's also this Federal Reserve side, which has to do with the monetary side. So it's sort of like all hands on deck, trying to deal with it in different ways. Let's take a look at another question. Demetrios asks, one question I have is who comes up with the deal in the legislative branch, and is there a time limit or a waiting line for a bill? So who comes up with a deal? Any member of Congress can come up with a deal. In the cases that we've been looking at, it's been the executive branch working with the legislative branch. We've seen a lot of the leadership take the lead on these bills. Sometimes it's an individual, somebody who's not very well known. It doesn't happen very often. Sometimes we call these people backbenchers. In other words, they're not up in the forefront usually, but sometimes they come up with a deal. Sometimes they come up with the initial proposal, but usually we see people in the leadership on the Democratic side, on the Republican side, trying to come up with the initial idea and then try to come up with the deal. Sometimes we have groups of senators or groups of members in the House. Sometimes they call themselves gangs, like the Gang of Seven. We'll say, well, we're not going to do anything that increases the budget by X number or something like that. And so then they have to be dealt with. But really, anybody can put the deal together. It really matters how many people you can get to buy into it and sign on to it. That's how you get the deals done. A lot of it is done because of party, but a lot of it is also done because of people having relationships with each other, talking to each other, trying to give something so that they can get one more person on board. There's a lot of what we might call horse trading. You give somebody this, they give you that. Sometimes it's called log rolling, where you say, hey, if you vote for this bill, I know there's this other bill that you want somebody like me to vote for, and I'd be willing to vote for that if you vote for this bill. So there's some deal making going on. That's why we say that looking at bills being made is sort of like watching sausage being made. You might like the end product, but you don't want to watch it being made. Oh, and is there a time limit? No, these things could happen simultaneously. They could be going on, one after another. What we've seen, though, is we've seen one bill and then another one a couple weeks later, and another one a couple weeks later, but they could be happening all at the same time. You could be dealing with small businesses at the same time you're dealing with unemployment, at the same time you're dealing with direct payments to people, at the same time you're dealing with hospitals, and at the same time you're dealing with funding schools and police officers and firefighters at the local level. You could be doing all of that at the same time. That's not what we've seen, though. That's not what we've seen. And of course, it doesn't help the situation that it's not safe, right? The people in charge of the health policy in Washington, D.C. and within the Capitol are saying it's not safe to be here. And so it's hard for them to figure out how they're going to get this done. Let's take another question. Andy asks, why are they raising the amount for unemployment? And I think what he might be talking about there is the unemployment payments that are going out to people, but then also an additional amount of money. And some other people had that question as well. I don't know exactly, but my guess is that the current situation is a little bit different than normal, if you can call it that, normal unemployment. Usually when you are unemployed and you get unemployment insurance that you've paid into while you've been working, the expectation is that you're going to be unemployed for a while, you're going to look for a job, you're going to get a job, and then you're going to go off the unemployment rolls, as they say. In this situation, we're seeing record numbers of millions of people being unemployed because the government is saying you can't work because it's not safe unless you're an essential employee. Shout out to the essential employees. Thank you for what you're doing. But what they're saying now is you can't work. So in that case, it's not a situation where you can get unemployment and then you can get off unemployment because you don't get a job. And so they're saying this is going to last for a while. Maybe we need to do more than just the normal, if you can call it that, unemployment. And we got to add another $1,200 check so that people can pay the bills and do the things that they need to do because they're not allowed to work right now.